Hey everyone, welcome back to Reed Makes. This diorama is loosely based off of a theory for the 5th episode of the Ahsoka show, so make sure to stop watching now if you don't want any spoilers. I started by building up the base of the diorama with some foam board. Then I hot glued the pieces in place inside the picture frame and left a gap so that I could run my electronics later on. And then I built up one side of the diorama with some XPS foam. After gluing the pieces in place, I then carved them to create a nice slope. Then I mixed together some plaster, paint, and Mod Podge to create a texture paste. So the theory that inspired this diorama is that the 5th episode of Ahsoka might have a scene where Anakin and Ahsoka fight on Mustafar. So for this diorama, I decided to kind of recreate the scene where Anakin and Obi-Wan fight, but instead of Obi-Wan, it'll be Ahsoka. I ended up cutting this lower section out as I felt like it looked too high. For the lights under the resin, I'm using a 5-volt LED strip. This strip you can cut in sections, as you can see here. Off camera, I went and soldered the connections in a parallel circuit, as you can see here. I wanted to put something on top of the lights to protect them from the resin, but also to help diffuse the light. To diffuse the light, I sanded down the acrylic sheet to give it more opacity. And then I painted the sheet orange to give it a warmer tone. I glued on some more acrylic sheets on the sides of the diorama to create a wall for the resin. And I used UV resin to create a watertight seal. And then I drilled a hole in the center and ran a straw through so that I could run my wires later on. I was a bit nervous doing a resin pour as it was my first time, but I was actually pleasantly surprised and it went pretty well. After mixing, I added some red and orange dye for the lava. I also added some more drops at the end and then swirled them around, hoping to create a nice effect on the surface. I also added some resin onto the hill and then painted on yellows and oranges to create a lava effect. I ended up having to lower the LED strip away from the resin. When I poured the resin against the sanded down acrylic, it still filled the gaps, which made the acrylic actually clear again. So I lowered it and now I actually had more of a glow effect. After removing the acrylic walls, I then cleaned up the edges and moved on to the next section of the diorama. Here I am making the small platform that Anakin stands on during his fight against Obi-Wan on Mustafar. I marked and cut out triangle sections of cardstock like this, and then after I glued them onto another piece of cardstock so that I could have little gaps. After finishing the floor of the platform, I then moved on to the little wall sections that go around the sides. I wanted the corners to have a bit of a sloping section, so I mixed together this 2-part epoxy putty and then sculpted the corners to have some slopes. Once the putty had dried, I then moved on to these little vents on the sides and a few more other bits and pieces. I drilled a hole through the middle of the platform so that I could run wires for Anakin's lightsaber later on. And then I gave the platform a base coat of black and then followed it with some oranges and browns. This platform has an alternating pattern of black and brown, so I went back and painted the other sections black. I added some other rust effects, and this was the final look. The last part that I wanted to build was a small portal that Ahsoka would be walking through from the world between worlds. I am using a 3-volt LED filament for the light. Once I had the archway cut out, I then traced on various stones with a ballpoint pen. I then painted both the arch and the ground with a darker charcoal color to give it more of an ashy look. Once all the terrain was finished, I then moved on to painting both Ahsoka and Anakin. I primed them both in black and then gave them a dry brush of light gray and then white. The hardest part of this whole diorama was probably painting all the little details on Ahsoka's face. She has all these little white markings. I then painted her blue stripes on her head tails. Finally, about 5 hours later, her head was done, and then I could move on to the rest of her clothing. With Ahsoka finished, I could then move on to painting Anakin. Again, I started with a base coat in black and then dry brushed with gray and white. I painted his robes with a dark brown. And then I painted this outer section of his robe with a really dark brown and then gave it a wash to give it a leathery look. I painted his boots with the same dark brown and then moved on to his belt. And then I finished painting Anakin by painting his face and his hair. With both my miniatures painted, I then painted the sides of the diorama with a matte black. I disarmed Anakin, and then gave him a nice bright lightsaber. I added some small lights under the platform, and then glued the platform and Anakin. Lastly, I added Ahsoka. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you have any other video recommendations, leave it down in the comments below. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one.